What's up everyone, Darkblade here, and it's that time of year again where we go back and take a look at my personal top 10 games of 2013. 2013, game-wise, has been a really good year. There's been lots of decent releases, as well as the introduction for the next generation of consoles. I must confess I actually struggled to put together this list because there are more than 10 games that I really enjoyed this year. But unfortunately there isn't room on this list for all of them. Now remember that this is a personal list. You may disagree with some of my choices here and that, but these are the games, the top 10 games that I personally most enjoyed throughout 2013. Anyway, let's get on with the celebration of the top 10 games of 2013 with my number 10 slot, Dragon's Crown. Developed by Atlus and Vanillaware, Dragon's Crown was released for the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita on July 25th in Japan, August 6th in America, and unfortunately the 11th of October in the EU. Luckily, the PlayStation 3 was not region locked, so I was able to get this game around the same time as it was released in America. Dragon's Crown is a throwback to the old games like Golden Axe, and that is a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up role-playing game. All these elements are mashed together to form a very entertaining game, put it that way. The art style for Dragon's Crown is one of the most striking things about the game, and is very distinctive despite some of the imageries being a bit controversial. The controversy seems to come from some of the character designs, especially with the females in the game. Despite what you think about the art style though, this game is very entertaining to play and it's very well made. It is actually quite deep as well. Although some of the levels are a little bit repetitive, you can go through them multiple times to get different loots, play as different characters, tackle different paths through the level. It's a lot deeper than it seems. The loot system alone should have you coming back for more. For me though, personally, one of the biggest appeals about this game is it is couch co-op. I still am a great believer that the best way to play a game is with your friends in the same room, and Dragon's Crown allows for 4-player couch co-op, which really appealed to me. Sitting down with a bunch of friends and fighting your way through the various dungeons really does make for an entertaining evening. The combat system in Dragon's Crown is fairly straightforward with various magical attacks, sword slashes, depending on which character you're playing. Every character is different, so as long as you're picking different characters, no two players will ever be the same. At first, I must confess I wasn't actually going to pick up Dragon's Crown, but I bought it on a spur of the moment, and I'm really glad I did, because this game was a lot of fun to play. Now, at number 9 is Killzone Shadowfall, the first PlayStation 4 game to be put on any of my lists. Developed by Guerrilla Games, Killzone Shadowfall was released November the 15th in North America and November the 29th in the EU. It basically was released alongside the PlayStation 4 as one of its launch games. The game follows on from the previous Killzone games in the series. It basically tells the story 30 years after Helgen was made uninhabitable. Now the Helghast coincide with the Vectans on the planet Vector. It basically feels very similar to a Berlin Wall situation, where half the planet is cut in half belong to the Helghast, half belong to the Vectans. Anyway, throughout the game, both sides are conducting various covert operations against the other, and this is what Killzone Shadowfall is mainly all about. Killzone Shadowfall, like all the other Killzones, is a first-person shooter set with a sci-fi background. Nothing has changed much in terms of gameplay from the previous Killzones in Killzone Shadowfall. Everything you would be familiar in the other Killzones are present here, but there are a few added bonuses. For example, when it comes to gameplay, you have a functionality in the form of the Owl, which is basically a floating drone that follows you around and assists you. This can be controlled with the touchpad on the PlayStation 4 control pad, providing you with cover and fire, shields, grappling hooks, and so on. Killzone Shadowfall's single player also gives a little bit more of an emphasis on possible stealth actions and the ability to maybe go off the beaten track a little bit more than you would in normal first-person shooter games, although this is only for a few levels, as the later levels seem to lack this option. Multiplayer 2 does return with Killzone Shadowfall, and I am actually quite a fan of the multiplayer on Killzone Shadowfall. It's actually where I'm spending the most time with it at the moment. This might be due to the fact that I've actually skipped out Battlefield 4 and Call of Duty this year in favour of Killzone Shadowfall, but the pace of the multiplayer really does suit my gameplay style, and I really do enjoy the mechanics of the multiplayer. You get to pick 3 classes in the multiplayer: Assault, Scout and Support. These all give you different abilities to aid you and your teammates in the multiplayer. Overall, Killzone Shadowfall was a bit of a surprise. I mean, I haven't been the hugest Killzone fan out there, but Killzone Shadowfall really did appeal to me. The graphics are astounding. Well, what do you expect from a next generation game? It runs very smoothly. The multiplayer is enjoyable, and the single player, whilst not the best thing about the game, still provides entertainment. I have spent a lot of time on this game and I will continue to do so. Next is the number 8 slot, and that goes to God of War Ascension. Developed by Santa Monica Studios for the PlayStation 3, God of War Ascension was released from the 12th of March to around the 15th of March, depending where you lived in the world. Anyone who is familiar with the God of War series will understand what's coming here. Not much has changed, except the story has been explored further, as this is a prequel to the existing God of War titles. It tells the story of how Kratos broke his bond to Ares, the God of War, and became, well, independent. In this game, the Furies are set upon Kratos thanks to the fact that he's broken his bond with the God of War, and he must battle them and free himself from their clutches, as well as the will of Ares. I mean, in this game we see a very human Kratos. He's not completely overtaken by vengeance and rage. It actually adds some three-dimensional aspects to the character of Kratos. The story is told quite well, although it is not the best in the series in my opinion. As for the gameplay is as smooth as ever. Basically every time they do release a God of War, they somehow manage to smooth out the gameplay even more than it already is. It is basically the same hack and slash scenario over again though, where you fight your way through waves of enemies, various mythological Greek beasts, until you get to your goal, where you normally fight a boss or have some sort of quick time event. It is very linear in terms of exploration and storytelling, but that is not necessarily a bad thing, as it steers you, drives you in a certain direction and tells a story. As you go through the game, you get to power up your abilities, your weapons, you gain new powers, you gain elemental effects for the Blades of Chaos as well that help you bring down enemies. It's all very enjoyable, and for me personally, I find it a great way to relieve tension. Now, a first to the series though was that they brought multiplayer into God of War. At first I wasn't too keen on the multiplayer, but it is quite unique. It's slightly different. You don't see many multiplayer games like this, and whereas it may not be my favourite multiplayer game out there, it's definitely worth trying out, as it does offer quite a bit of depth. As you battle through the multiplayer, there's a series of parries, blocks, attacks that make for a very interesting paper, rock, scissors affair. Lastly, God of War Ascension comes with some beautiful visuals and very graphic violence. So if you're a bit squeamish, some of the, shall we say, blood and violence in God of War Ascension will have your stomach turning. Overall though, I love God of War Ascension. I may be a bit biased here because I am a big fan of the series, but I thoroughly enjoyed this game at the start of the year. Now next is number 7, Grand Theft Auto 5. Developed by Rockstar North, Grand Theft Auto 5 was released on September 17th worldwide. Anyone who is familiar with the Grand Theft Auto style of gameplay will know what to expect here. It is a mass open world game that, for lack of a better word, represents freedom in gaming. Unfortunately for me though, this freedom came at a cost, because I felt that sometimes the story was a little bit lacking in places, and I didn't care about as many of the characters as in previous Grand Theft Auto games, or in fact other Rockstar games. This is because Grand Theft Auto 5's main story is split into 3 main protagonists, if you can call them protagonists. I mean, some of them do quite some bad things, so whether you want to call them protagonists or not is another matter. Anyway, the story revolves around Trevor, Michael and Franklin. The main plot revolves around these 3 characters and their escapades, all various crime-related activities basically, with stories revolving around bank robbery to infiltrating the FBI. Basically, there is a whole host of stories going on here. Too much to explain in this short time limit. The gameplay for Grand Theft Auto 5 is what you expect from Grand Theft Auto, but it seems a lot smoother than its predecessor Grand Theft Auto 4. The cars handle so much better. The running around in third person and shooting in third person is also a lot smoother. It feels more like Red Dead than previous Grand Theft Auto games in my opinion, in terms of running around on foot anyway. On top of that, you have now planes, you have so many modes of transports, you have so much to do in this game, from mini games like golf, tennis, to yoga, you can buy properties. Basically, this game feels like what Grand Theft Auto 4 should have been like, in my opinion. On top of Grand Theft Auto 5 came Grand Theft Auto Online as well, which I'm including in this list anyway, which brings a whole host of multiplayer options to the game. Grand Theft Auto Online is difficult to explain how vast it actually is and what you can get up to, from simple death matches to heist missions with your friends, to simply driving around and causing havoc. There is so much to do in Grand Theft Auto Online. Lastly, when it comes to the graphics as well, Grand Theft Auto 5 does look good. It is an amazing game to look at. Where it may not be the best, most visually stunning in terms of attention to detail, the actual vastness of the game looks incredible. If you can only really buy one game, and you want to buy a game that's going to last you a long time, then I would certainly advise Grand Theft Auto 5. Now, my number 6 slot goes to Ni no Kuni: Wrath of the White Witch. Developed by Level 5 and Studio Ghibli, Ni no Kuni was released on November 17th in Japan and late January, early February in the rest of the world. It's a throwback to classic role-playing games, which most developers seem to steer away from in this day and age. Ni no Kuni tells the emotional tale of Oliver, who suffers quite a heavy loss in his life, and thus travels to another world thanks to Drippy, High Lord of the Fairies. In this other world, Oliver is tasked with restoring the realm, restoring people's emotions, and basically bringing light to a world that's fallen into darkness. The story is hard to describe again, and like I said, I don't want to spoil these stories too much with these little short segments and that, but the story is very entertaining, despite it looking a little bit childish at first glance. But it is really worth playing it for the story. The game's story tackles some very deep and dark places as well, from the loss of family members to emotion to people who are broken-hearted. Basically, there are some very deep-seated metaphors going on in this game. The gameplay in Ni no Kuni is also a very good aspect of the game. It seems to combine various elements, from classic role-playing elements to even Pokemon, where you capture familiars and have them battle for you. Random encounters, boss battles, dungeons to explore. There are various side quests, collectibles, travelling, and even an open map where you can travel. There is just so much to do in this game, and it all feels quite familiar. Anyone who misses role-playing games from the past will feel at home here. There was a familiarity about Ni no Kuni that really did appeal to me. And then there is the graphical side of the game. Thanks to Studio Ghibli, Ni no Kuni really does look like you're watching an anime. It is probably one of the best cel-shaded games out there on the market today. Some people say that the look of the game looks very childish, but to be honest, to me it looks gorgeous. And I really do appreciate the art that has gone into this game. Overall, Ni no Kuni: Wrath of the White Witch was another game that I bought on spur of the moment this year, like Dragon's Crown, and I'm glad I did because I actually really surprised myself and enjoyed this game thoroughly. And if you are a fan of role-playing games, especially role-playing games of the past, then you'll really get some fun out of Ni no Kuni: Wrath of the White Witch. Now, this brings us to the halfway point and our number 5 slot, Rayman Legends. Developed by Ubisoft, Rayman Legends is the continuation of Rayman Origins. Released around the world end of August, start of September, Rayman Legends is a classic platforming game. Rayman Legends was released on all major platforms and will be coming out for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One in 2014. Now, Rayman Legends is not big on story. Basically, it follows Rayman, Globex and the Teensies, who have been asleep for centuries. Now trouble has stirred up again and they have been awoken once more to save the day. Basically, the antagonists, the Dark Teensies, have been stirring up trouble around the land, and it's up to Rayman, Globex, the Teensies, and the newly introduced princesses to set things right. The story, whilst entertaining and told in a very quirky way through various voice mumbles rather than actual dialogue, is not the biggest part about Rayman Legends, but it is still quite entertaining and humorous in places. What is the biggest thing about Rayman Legends, though, is the gameplay, because this gameplay is almost perfect in terms of platforming. It carries on the same style of gameplay from Rayman Origins, where you and up to 3 other players, 4 in total, can simultaneously make your way through the various levels in the game. The levels are actually divided up into paintings in Rayman Legends. Along the way you collect lums to get more points, defeat enemies, free captured Teensies, and defeat various bosses. You'll hop, jump, slide, swim, fly, hover, glide your way through all the levels in this game. And although you have various ways of tackling all the levels, some of them can actually be quite tricky and a challenge even to the most veteran of players. One of the best things about Rayman Legends, in my opinion, were the music-based levels that covered songs such as Eye of the Tiger in a Rayman rendition. These were so entertaining, I just wish there were more of them in the game. Lastly, the graphics in Rayman Legends are beautiful. Again, like Rayman Origins, it's the basic 2D hand-drawn images that look crisp and clear, but there have also been added 3D elements like 3D shading and lighting that really do make the look of Rayman Legends quite distinct and a treat to the eye. Now overall, again, I loved Rayman Legends because it had one key feature that really does put games high in my opinion, and that is you can play it with your friends on the sofa. If you loved Rayman Origins like I did, then you're gonna love Rayman Legends. And if you haven't played Rayman Origins, then there are even some remastered Rayman Origin levels in Rayman Legends for you to play. Now, next on my list is number 4, BioShock Infinite. Developed by Irrational Games and published by 2K Games, BioShock Infinite was released on March 26 last year. It was released for the PlayStation 3, 360 and PC. BioShock Infinite received a lot of hype leading up to its release as well, thanks to the success of the previous BioShock games. The story in BioShock Infinite revolves around the two characters of Booker DeWitt, the guy who you play, and the girl Elizabeth, who you're sent into Columbia to rescue. Columbia is the new setting. You're no longer in the underwater city of Rapture, instead you're in the city in the clouds, referred to as Columbia. This makes for a very different type of game, even though much of the gameplay remains the same to the previous BioShocks. The setting in Columbia is much more vibrant and less claustrophobic. Whilst the game is still linear, you can go off the beaten track a little bit and explore Columbia, thus giving you insight into how life is like on this floating city. This exploration and insight into the city allows the story to become a lot more richer and a lot more in-depth if you take the time to explore. Now, whether you think the ending was controversial, disappointing, or you thoroughly enjoyed it, you've got to say one thing about the ending, and that is it did get you talking. I personally enjoyed the ending, and it was a bit of a shock, but for me the ending didn't spoil the game in any ways. The gameplay for BioShock Infinite, like I said, is very similar to the previous BioShock games, and thus I can't fault it that much. It's a basic, straightforward first-person shooter with magical elements in the form of vigors, which replaced the plasmids of the previous BioShocks. You'll spend most of your time shooting enemies up, using your vigors to cast various, well, for lack of a better word, magic spells at people, from summoning crows to setting people alight with flaming fireballs. It's all very enjoyable. After that, Booker also has a grappling hook that allows him to ride the skyline around various parts of the level. This can give you sometimes a tactical advantage over enemies, especially in tight situations. Graphically, BioShock Infinite is a gorgeous game to look at too. Like I said, Columbia is a very bright and vibrant place when compared to the original BioShock, and this allows for a much greater use of lighting and effects. The voice acting and music are all done brilliantly. I can't really fault them in any way. Overall, BioShock Infinite can really be torn apart semiotically and metaphorically. But at the end of the day, I ask myself, do I like the game? Yes or no? Did I have fun? Yes or no? And with BioShock, I certainly did. Now next up is number 3, and that is Pokemon X and Y. Now I personally had Pokemon version Y, as my girlfriend had Pokemon X. But to be honest, there is no real difference apart from maybe which specific Pokemon you can get in each version, as well as the various Megastones. Developed by Game Freak and published by Nintendo, Pokemon X and Y was released on October 12th worldwide last year, and was released exclusively for the Nintendo 3DS. The game's story is very, very similar to the previous installments of the Pokemon series. Basically, you start off as a young boy or girl setting off on your Pokemon adventure. You'll start off by giving it a first Pokemon, and along the way you'll capture new ones, expanding your team as you battle your way through the region's gyms in order to become the Pokemon champion. Along the way though, in this game there is a nefarious Team Flare who are setting out to destroy the world, and it's your job to also stop them. Whilst the story may not be anything really deep, it was entertaining enough, even more so than the previous installments in the Pokemon series. Now, whereas the story may not be anything to shout home about, the gameplay for Pokemon X and Y did innovate a lot of things from the previous series. For a starter, this is the first main Pokemon series that has been put into 3D. Basically, instead of having sprites, which the previous Pokemon games had, it was now full polygon 3D graphics. It also added some very unique gameplay aspects in the forms of Megastones. These allowed certain Pokemon to Mega Evolve into much powerful versions of themselves. This can really swing the tide of battle depending on when you Mega Evolved and which Pokemon you Mega Evolved. On top of this, simple things like XP share that allowed all your Pokemon to gain experience made the game so much more enjoyable than the previous installments. Add to this online training, online battles, the ability to IV your Pokemons through their super training, and the Pokemon and Me sections made the game so much more enjoyable. Also adding to this as well, I should add that the fact that you can customize your trainer at last really did add to the game. Now I must confess, for me personally, I had a break from Pokemon, so coming back to it now was a breath of fresh air. I really enjoyed the game. I got into it so much. I played over 200 hours on the game alone. Overall, I must confess, I wasn't really sure about picking this game up, but I am so glad I did, as I do not regret playing a single moment of this game. Now the number 2 slot goes to The Last of Us. Developed by Naughty Dog, The Last of Us was released on June 14th. for the PlayStation 3. The Last of Us is a new IP for Naughty Dog and follows the story of Joel and Ellie as they survive a pandemic that has radically changed the world as we know it. Infected humans run wild, and survivors are actually killing each other for food and weaponry. It is, in a way, a story that has been told before in various post-apocalyptic movies, books and games. But it does have a unique difference, in my opinion, and that is its attention to detail. Mainly the attention to detail on Joel and Ellie's relationship and the situations they get into. Add to this too that the fact that the infected humans aren't zombies, they're actually infected with a fungal infection, as they also don't really function like standard zombies. I don't want to spoil the story any more than I should because, like Bioshock Infinite, this game is very story heavy. The gameplay in The Last of Us is very familiar to anyone who's played the Uncharted series, although in The Last of Us it is slowed down in terms of pace. You can't simply run around jumping from ledge to ledge in The Last of Us. It doesn't work like that. You need to be a bit more stealthy and conserve ammo. You can't simply blow your way through a horde of infected. This won't work. You need to be wise. You need to think a bit more. You have to try to think, can I actually bypass them without wasting any of my supplies at all? I've heard some people describe the gameplay in The Last of Us as a generic third-person shooter, but I feel it's not, because it adds elements of survival horror games into it. It mixes it up a little bit. Graphically though, The Last of Us's presentation is really good. I mean, it's basically pushing the PlayStation 3 to its limits. The capture animation is phenomenal, and every environment has had so much fine detail put into them. On top of this, you have some stellar performances from pretty much all of the cast who are involved in this game. On top of this too, you have a multiplayer mode. Whilst I don't think the multiplayer will catch on as well as the Uncharted 3 multiplayer did, it is still thoroughly enjoyable, and it's a different pace from the standard multiplayer games you see this day and age. The only thing I have to say though is that I am so disappointed that the multiplayer mode didn't have some sort of mode where you fought off cooperatively infected enemies. That would have made this game pretty much perfect for me in terms of multiplayer. But maybe it might come in the future because there is still DLC to come out for The Last of Us. Overall, I'm so pleased with The Last of Us and that. And although it didn't get my #1 slot, it's a game that certainly is worth playing. Anyone who enjoys a good story, good gameplay and good presentation will get a lot out of The Last of Us. Now, the #1 slot for my favourite game I enjoyed the most in 2013 goes to Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Assassin's Creed 4 was developed by Ubisoft and released late October, early November for all major systems. Assassin's Creed 4 is the first Assassin's Creed game I've actually felt to put this high in any of my lists. And this is for many reasons. Now I must confess most of these are for personal reasons, as I can understand that how other games in this list are more breakthrough in terms of gameplay, graphics and storytelling. But Assassin's Creed 4 for me, I got most emotionally involved in. The story in Assassin's Creed 4 focuses on the golden age of piracy as you play as Edward Kenway, as you take control of your ship, the Jackdaw, and go about plundering the Caribbean. Edward is not your standard straightforward assassin either. He is basically a rogue. He's not gone through assassin training, he hasn't earned the outfit, yet he still does as he pleases, which is quite a refreshing take on the Assassin's Creed universe. As you play as Edward, you'll come across the assassins, the Templars, as well as other famous pirate figures of the era. In my opinion, it was nice to focus mainly on the ancestor and his personality and his story, rather than the actual feud between the Templars and Assassins, or the modern day side of the Assassin's Creed series. Now for me, where Assassin's Creed 4 really does shine is in terms of the gameplay department. Whilst it might not be anything groundbreaking, what it does, it smooths out everything about the previous games, making them a lot more playable in my opinion. There are still a few bugs here and there in terms of gameplay, but one of the big things for me was the fact that naval combat has become the main focus of this game. Thanks to the naval gameplay, the land-based gameplay, the climbing, the free running and combat, this game allows you to explore a lot more than any of the previous Assassin's Creed games, making it very much an open world experience. You can easily get yourself lost in this game, thanks to the sailing and exploration. Graphically, Assassin's Creed 4 is still a good looking game, especially if you play it on the Xbox One or PlayStation 4. The voice acting again, in my opinion, was great. I do think that the cast did a really good job in portraying their characters in the game. The multiplayer returns with Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, but unfortunately this is much the same as the previous Assassin's Creed games, with nothing too special to mention here. Now overall, sometimes I even question myself why I've put Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag in the #1 slot. And that is simply because although The Last of Us and Pokemon X and Y were very good games and I spent a long time playing both of them, I had the most fun playing Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag last year. And at the end of the day, no matter what list it is, if it's a personal preference list, then it should be how you felt about the games. And this is how I felt about the games from 2013. Now at the end of the day though, 2013 has been a wonderful year for games, and every game on this list in some way deserves to be at the #1 slot, whether it be for creative stories, great gameplay, great presentation. Each one of these games has something going for it. I'd love to hear what each of your favourite games of the year was. Maybe not what the industry said was the very best games, but what you personally enjoyed the most. So leave a comment down below and let me know. Anyway, I've been Darkblade, bringing you my top 10 games of 2013. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like for more.